Okay, so in this video, we're going to be looking at what are factors, what are multiples, and what are prime, and what are composite numbers. All right, so this is a bit of an introduction into your algebra because you're going to be using all of these types of numbers when dealing with your algebra in maths. And it's very important to understand what is a factor, what is a multiple, and what is a prime and composite number. So let's get into, first of all, what is a factor. So factors are any natural number that can divide into another number without there being a remainder. Being a remainder. So what they mean by this is we are not going to have any decimals or fractions or anything like that over here. So no decimals. And so it's going to be dividing into a number perfectly. All right. So let's take a look at what that means. If we look at a quick example, say now we have the number 12. All right. Now 12 in itself is a factor to a few numbers. For example, 12 is a factor to the number 24. Because 12 can go into 24 twice perfectly without there being any remainder. Okay, without there being any remainder, you can put 12 into 24. So 12 is a factor of 24. Not only can 12 be a factor, let's take a look at the number 4 as a factor. Now 4 can go into 8 perfectly. It can also go into 12 perfectly. And it can also go into the number 16 perfectly. So 4 is then a factor of 8, 12, and 16, along with other many numbers. But it is a perfect factor for 8, 12, and 16. And you can multiply 4 by 2 to get to 8, multiply 4 by 3 to get to 12, and multiply 4 by itself to get to 16. So in your grade 9 maths that you're busy with, you might get a question that asks you something like this. What are the factors of maybe, let's say, 26? So the question is asking you, what are the factors of 26? So you would take 26 and starting from the lowest point possible, let's say 1, you would see if you can get 1 to divide into 26 perfectly without there being a remainder. So yes, you can do that with 1, of course, because 1 times 26 is equivalent to 26 with no remainder. So that means that both 1 and 26 are factors of 26. And let's move on to the next number. So say now we want to see if 2 is a factor of 26. So what can you multiply by 2 to perfectly divide it into 26? You can multiply it by 13. So now we know that both 2 and 13 are factors of 26. What else? Let's try 3. Can you multiply 3 by anything to get into 26? Okay, and you'll realize that you can't multiply 3 by anything to get into 26, because if you try and divide 26 by 3 on your calculator, you get 8.66. And that over there is a decimal point. So it is not a factor of 26, neither is 8.66. 0.66. So that is not going to work for us. So what if we try the next number? Let's try 4. Can you multiply 4 by another number to get the number of 26? And no, you can't, because if you need to multiply 4 to get 26, you have to multiply it by 6.5. So no, 4 is not a factor of 26. These are the only factors for the number 26. And so you have officially answered the question. They were wondering, what are the factors of 26? And so you would say the factors of 26 are 1, 2, 13, and 26 itself. Those are the only numbers that can divide into 26 without there being a remainder. Okay, so next let's look at what are multiples. So when we multiply any natural number, so that's a number that we count in. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, all those numbers that you can count in. When we multiply any natural number with another natural number, the result is a multiple. Okay, so let's look at an example. Let's say we've got the number 4. All right, and 4 times by 2 is 8. And so 8 in this case is a multiple. So in the form of a question that you might get, they might say something along the lines of, what are the first 5 multiples of, let's say, 3? So what you would do is you would go ahead and start multiplying 3 from the lowest possible point of multiplication. So that would be 3 times 1 upward until you get to the first 5 multiples. So 3 times 1 is 3. That's 1 multiple. 3 times 2 is 6. That's another multiple. So we've got our first multiple. We've got our second multiple. 3 times 3 is 9. So we've got our third multiple now. So we got 2 more to go. 3 times 4 is 12. So that makes up our fourth multiple. And 3 times 5 is 15. So that is our fifth multiple. So those are the first 5 multiples of 3. And those are 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. So that would be your answer. 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. Your first 5 multiples of the number 3. Okay, so we define prime numbers as any number, and we'll just use the hashtag symbol for number, any number that can be divided by only the number 1 and itself. So let's look at some examples of prime numbers. One example we have is 2. Another one we have is 3. Okay, 4 is not a prime number because you'll realize that you can divide 4 by itself. You can divide 4 by 2. And you can divide 4 by 1. So of course, we see that 4 is not a prime number. So let's look at what our next prime number is. We've got 5. Five is a prime number. We've also got 7 as a prime number. And what's next? Let's see. Is 8 a prime number? No, 8's not a prime number. Is 9 a prime number? No, because we know that 8 can be divided by 4, it can be divided by 2, and it can be divided by itself and 1. And 9 can be divided by 3, itself, and 1. So those are not prime numbers. So let's prove that these numbers that we have over here are truly prime numbers. Is 2 a prime number? 3, 5, and 7. Are these numbers truly prime numbers? So let's go ahead and look at the number 2. If we divide 2 by 2, we get 1. So 2 can be divided by 2. What else can 2 be divided by? 2 can be divided by 1 to give us 2. And you'll realize over here that we can no longer divide 2 by anything else, because if we were to even try, we would be dealing with fractions. And the same applies to numbers like 3, 5, and 7. If we look at 7, which is a bit more of a larger number than the rest of them, 7 can be divided by itself to give us 1. And 7 can be divided by 1 to give us 7. And you'll realize that you can't divide 7 by anything else. So let's look, maybe 7 divided by 2? No, you can't, because 7 divided by 2 is 3.5, which is not a natural number. So it's not perfectly divided. We've got a decimal point over there. And so we know that 7 is a prime number because it cannot be divided by anything else but 1 and itself. Some of the questions you might get could be such as these. So what are the first 5 prime numbers? Could be a question. So what are the first prime numbers? Or maybe they could say list the first 5 prime numbers, or they could say list the first 13 prime numbers, something along the lines of this. Or they could give you a list of numbers and they could ask, are the numbers below prime numbers, or are they composite numbers? And we'll look at what a composite number is next in a short while. But basically, a composite number, and we'll touch on it again, but a composite number is any number that is not a prime number. So most other numbers that is not a prime number. So these are 2 ways in which you're most likely to be asked about prime numbers. Composite numbers. What are composite numbers? So we just spoke about prime numbers, and now composite numbers are any numbers that are not prime numbers. So these are numbers that have more than 2 factors. So we spoke about prime numbers having the. So we spoke about prime numbers, and we said prime numbers have only 2 factors, and the only 2 factors of a prime number is 1 and the number itself. Okay, 1 and itself. But when we're dealing with composite numbers, they can have very many factors. And let's look at an example. So 8, the number 8 is an example of a composite numbers or composite number. If we divide the number 8, we can divide 8 by 1 to give us 8. We can also divide 8 by 8 to give us 1. And so at this point, you might be thinking to yourself, but that's exactly the same thing that you do to prime numbers. But it is, however, 8 can also be divided by other factors like 2. to give us 4. And based on this, we know that 8 can also be divided by 4 to give us 2. And so you can see now that the number 8 has 1, 2, 3, 4 different ways in which it can be divided. And all of these that we got over here are factors of 8. So you can see that 8 has 1, 2, 3, 4 different factors. And so it is not a prime number. It is not prime, which means it is a composite number.